Bird Box seems to be a movie that is everywhere at the moment. In the news, on social media, and there seems to be a lot of ending explained videos on it. So I thought I'd take a look at this movie and see if it's worth the watch that everybody so desires. This is the first movie that I've seen Sandra Bullock in for a while, and it seems like quite an interesting concept. So, let's dive in. Before I go ahead, make sure you go over to my Twitter @brainpilot_ and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. So without further ado, I am Brain Pilot, and here is Bird Box: Is It Worth Watching? The story. The story jumps between different time periods, between 5 years and the present day. This is something that I thought was a good idea because we actually got to see how Mallory got in the situation that she is in with her 2 kids. The concept of the movie had a fairly original feel to it, but it also felt like many other movies that I've seen before, which is something that I'll touch on in a bit. So there is an epidemic that started in Russia and Europe and has spread to the States, and it's basically whenever you see this being or monster, we don't know what it is, but whatever you see, it makes you commit suicide whenever you see it. It's an interesting concept for a film. This is why people wear blindfolds. It's the fear of seeing the monster and committing suicide. I was unsure throughout all of the film what the being actually was. Early on in the film, Lydia sees this monster and talks to her like it's her mother, and then she goes and sits in the car that is on fire. So it may be a spirit from a voice of a loved one that provides comfort, or at least makes you think that. Anyway, there are several people who have found safe haven in a house, and of course it was kind of predictable that they all wouldn't make the final cut. And obviously they didn't, as at the start it was only Mallory and her 2 kids. One by one, they each get exposed to the monster, or they get killed by the stranger that was let in. I thought that was a stupid idea. John Malkovich's character, Douglas, was the only person who seemed concerned in the house, and everybody should have listened to him. A classic moment where you're shouting at the screen. One thing that I really liked was how when the movie would cut to different time periods on the boat that Mallory and her 2 children were on, and you got to see the different problems that she encountered on the way. Also, how it tied into the story of the past. How we literally saw the beginning of the movie in the last quarter of the movie. It all tied together perfectly. My only concern with the whole travelling on the boat was that I don't understand how she managed to navigate down the river for nearly 48 hours with 2 children, basically blind. And with 3 birds in a case. We see 5 years on that Mallory is living with Tom with the 2 kids, and they hear that there's a safe place 2 days down the river. Once they're about to flee the place that they're in, the people that have been spared by the being approach the house. Once she managed to escape the people that were allowed to run free and were on a mission to expose people to the monster, she reached the safe haven, and the movie finished with them in a school for the blind. It's one of those movies where you completely forget that people are actually blind, and that those are the ones that would be safe, as they would never be able to see the monster. The relationship that Mallory has with her children, I think, is a crucial part of the story. Throughout the whole of the film, she treats them as if they're not even related. Obviously, Girl isn't, but she treats both of them almost as if they're just companions and she's taking care of them. At one point, she was even willing to sacrifice one of them. However, in the end, you hear the first time she's ever told them that she's loved them, and she actually gave them names. She named Girl after her actual mother, and Boy after Tom. I feel she manages to make this massive leap due to the fact that for the past 5 years, there's been no hope, no future in sight, and no rest. Whereas when she arrives in the school for the blind, she finally sees other children, people, almost like a society that's thriving again. She has safety for the time being. She was a lone wolf before, and now she's actually part of something. Even in the real world, she was alone. Was it necessary for us to see the monster? I don't think so. If you think about it, at points we see the point of view from Mallory in the movie when she has the blindfold on. She's the person we are following, and at one point, we are. She was never exposed to the monster at any point. Yet there was always that fear. That is what we had. We never got to see it because we were never exposed to it. As original as I say that the concept is, it did remind me of some other movies at the same time. It reminded me of the recent movie A Quiet Place, where people are not allowed to make noise where they live, or the monster will come and get them. And it also reminded me a lot of the movie The Ritual. Both have similar concepts and are all executed quite well as well. But overall, I would say the story's strong and you're invested for most of it. The characters. Mallory. Mallory was the main character that we followed in the movie, and she was a hard, strict woman who, even though pregnant and didn't really want the child she was bearing, was the toughest that there was. I feel as though Mallory's character goes on a huge journey throughout the movie. She starts as this woman who doesn't show that much emotion and really just wants to stay in her studio and work, and in the end she transforms into this person who at one point risks the life of herself and her 2 children to make it as a group, rather than just herself and 1 child. She learns how to connect with other people. She becomes a key team player throughout this movie, opting not to leave people at the house, and always looking out for others. And she adopts different traits that, once at the school for the blind in the end of the movie, would render her almost a different character to what we saw at the start. She goes on a huge personal story that involves growth and development, and I'd say it's just as vital to the plot as what escaping the monster is. Tom. Tom is the main reason as to why Mallory actually survived the breakout and ended up in the house. Mallory was pregnant and exposed to the monster when he picked her up and helped her go inside. You see Tom as the one who is always looking out for her and everybody else, and is essentially the reason as to why herself and her children survived as long as they did. In the end, he ultimately sacrificed himself to save them. I thought this was a true act of the character. At points you see him open up and you see a soft side to him throughout the hard exterior. I thought the portrayal of the character was executed in the right way and a way that led you to buy into him completely. Douglas. I really liked this character. I thought that he was the character that spoke the most sense out of all of the group, and if this was real life, would most probably be a lot of people. He was the most apprehensive to welcome newcomers in, and rightly so, as the one that everybody let in ended up killing most of them. And himself. He was rude at a lot of points, but you let him off as it is the end of the world basically. As well, John Malkovich was perfect for this role. Gary. Gary was the outsider who was let into the property where everybody was safe. However, he'd been exposed to the monster but had not died and ultimately ended up exposing many other people to it. Tom Holland was perfect for this role. This character highlighted the relationship between the people that are allowed to see the monster and the people that can't. He was somebody who had a troubled past and he wanted to inflict violence onto others. And that's what spared him from the suicidal acts that the monster inflicts on people. And those were the people that were allowed to survive. And as well, by allowing Gary into the main part of the story, we got to see a glimpse of what this type of character is actually like. The children. The children were interesting characters to follow. They had a drill sergeant as a mother, and I'll use the term mother loosely, yet they didn't replicate that at all. They had the hopes and dreams that Tom was telling them about, and their mother seemed to lack. At one point you find out that girl is scared of Mallory, and it's no surprise as she was willing to sacrifice her at one point to save her and her son. I thought the performance from the young actors was fine. In fact, it was better than fine, it was good. I don't think that there was much that they could have done wrong, to be honest. Final thoughts. The hype that the movie had was immense. If I'm being honest, I don't know how or why it got that much hype. It's a movie that has a fairly interesting concept, some brilliant acting, but I wouldn't say that it's groundbreaking. Considering this was a Netflix original, yes, it could have been a cinema release, and it has the quality of acting and story to be in the cinema. As a 2-hour-long movie, it's something that has to keep you glued to the screen. And this is something that I had for the first hour and a half. And then I started to want the ending. And when the ending did finally arrive, my annoyance with it was that it was just a little bit too happy for me. I wanted to see the movie push the boundaries and maybe not make it so we're safe. I understand in the long run they may not be as safe as what they think, but I would have liked a little more. I'm not sure what, but something that really does leave you with a gut-hitting feeling. I would say that this movie, it's worth a watch, definitely. However, when something has too much hype, there's only one direction it can go, and that's down. But go and watch it and see what you think. If you want to support the channel in a different way, then I've recently set up a Patreon, and by going over there, you can get your hands on some exclusive content. Take a look and see what you think. What do you think of the movie Bird Box? What would you like me to review next? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.